Now, Christina Smith was a landlord, property developer, entrepreneur and philanthropist. She was known as the Queen of Covent Garden for her impact on the area of central London where she lived and worked. From her flat in the converted loft of a former warehouse, she set up shops and restaurants, bought up short leases and extended them, and used her resulting fortune to support the arts. The theatre owner and producer Dame Rosemary Squire worked with Christina Smith and became a friend.
Nothing about Christina was ever black or white. You know, she was in full technicolor. I think her red lips and her red clothes were emblematic of how she was as a person.
Christina was born in London in 1934, the daughter of Ronald Smith, who was the doctor at Rugby School, and his Finnish wife. After leaving school, Christina took on a number of jobs, including cooking on a yacht in the Mediterranean and working on a switchboard at a city firm.
Eventually, through a friend, I went to work for Terence Conran. Then I did a trip, and it wasn't really very planned, going to as many places as I could. Mexico, Japan, Nepal, and Greece and back here. And I had already decided to start up a retail shop, and I'd been sending samples back to myself in England.
Neal Street East was, I would describe it as an emporium. It was something that you would never find in this country. It had everything from fabulous kimonos to woven flip-flops. And I remember the actor John Malkovich saying to me, my absolute favourite shop in all of London is Neal Street East.
In the 60s, of course, there would have been the fruit and veg market there in Covent Garden. And there was a plan, wasn't there, at one point? Somebody was trying to knock it down and turn it into office blocks. Was she one of those who led the fight to preserve the old market buildings?
Absolutely. I think she had been there since the early 60s. And then in the 70s, she was, with others in Covent Garden, behind the campaign to save it.
This is the building that I first moved into in 1963. It was then a potato warehouse and the market was very active. I converted it into my wholesale warehouse.
And she had restaurants as well, didn't she? What were her restaurants like?
She had two restaurants, as I recall. She had Smith's of Covent Garden, which was right in the heart of Covent Garden. And on the ground floor, she had a gallery where she had lots of contemporary art exhibitions and openings and lots of press night openings for theatre shows.
And you've described her as being very forthright in her opinions. Could she sometimes get on the wrong side of people?
I think she was an acquired taste. Some people found her perhaps frustrating to deal with, and she did it her way.
I mean, I'm sort of person who's a failed perfectionist, so that's difficult to work with, I think, because nothing is ever perfect.
She was never once put down by anything. She said to me, she said, always have the confidence, Rosie, to ask the questions, even if they seem basic and banal. Test people on the ability to answer the straightforward questions. And I remember when I very first started Ambassador Theatre Group, which Christina was a founder shareholder of, we were buying the Duke of York's theatre and I was looking at all of the documents and I was saying, how on earth do you do this? This is so complicated, Christina. She said, oh, for God's sake, Rosie, if I can do it, so can you. Just ask the questions. Read the stuff and ask the questions. And she really did give me the confidence.
I did actually say I'd get married to somebody once, but I changed my mind. After that, I thought I ought to be really extremely sure. And I never asked anybody to marry me, so perhaps I should have done.
We've talked about her as somebody who had a very significant impact on a very famous part of London, but her cultural impact and her philanthropy probably went much wider than that, didn't it?
Oh, it did. Christina had huge passions. She loved theatre, and she always said that in another life she would have been an actor. She was a prominent figure in the Contemporary Art Society. She certainly had a fabulous art collection. She loved contemporary art. She was a great collector over the years. She had good friends, for example. Maggie Hambling was a great friend. There are lots of painters. Contemporary artists were supported by her. And of course, Donmar Warehouse, which is at the heart of Covent Garden, and particularly when Sam Mendes went there in the mid-90s with Caro Newling, she was hugely supportive of their regime and gave a lot of money to the Donmar, as well as the other passion she had, is architecture and buildings. She was hugely involved and very supportive of many architects. She adored buildings, and she was very passionate about how cities and spaces looked. Very knowledgeable and very particular. No one else like her that I've ever met.
That's Smith's Gallery, which isn't actually Smith's Gallery anymore. And here is Belgo, which occupies the space that Smith's restaurant used to. This building in which I felt I was the janitor for about 20 years.
Christina Smith, who's died aged 87.